in an awakening experience, I think broadly as it's understood in Buddhism, because there's many different streams of Buddhism, it would be to see that that has actually been no more than an idea. It's been really no more than a thought. And, thoughts come and go. And it seems like it's not, it's permanent, it's solid, it's fixed, it's been here all along. But actually, no, it's just been an oft repeated thought. And to see that is quite dramatic. It may not sound like much, it's just recognizing a thought. It is, but actually it's huge.
I'll beat my drum for you, I'll sing my song for you, I'll clap my hands to the beat that transforms into.
How has it been since the app has been out so far? What has surprised you? Anything you want to share about what's unfolded since it's been out?
Jack, you're the boss. Do you want to lead with that?
I'm the nephew, but the boss. Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I think, well, the first thing that comes to mind is that, we took a really big gamble. People said that we were kind of crazy. You're going to make an app with no choice, but choice is good. And we really kind of stuck to our guns that actually, no, when it comes to learning, when it comes to a journey, when it comes to kind of acquiring, new skills and really going somewhere, that actually, as a user, it's unfair to make the user make all those decisions, right? Like the burden, responsibility should be on us as the designers, to lay out a path of development for you. So that was the kind of this kind of crazy idea we had, and we really didn't know how it was going to be received. So one of the things that has happened, has evolved, is that we've seen that actually it's really resonated, and there's been some beautiful stories we've heard from our students who are using the app of getting through difficult times in life, or having kind of quite powerful, revelatory, kind of cosmic experiences with it, and most importantly of all, having kind of consistent deepening practice, which is really what we set out to do. So that's been a really, really rewarding journey for us.
Yeah. Can I just add something onto that as well? We had this hypothesis that a lot of people are kind of on again, off again with meditation practice, which is quite a large demographic, I think. If they know what the deeper possibilities are of a longer term path of meditation, that makes such a difference. To not think of meditation as a sort of brief intervention when I need it, but which is how it's been framed a lot in the world of mindfulness based stress reduction. Basically, a hit to reduce my stress. I mean, that's great, but if you understand that it can be a path of transformation. And in order to do that, it has to be a long-term consistent thing that motivates daily sitting. The consistency of it. You need a reason to do it long term and to do it consistently. And so we built that in from the very start. Look, hey, there's much more than just stress reducing mindfulness. That's absolutely great and right, but it's kind of foundational, or it's gateway to much more. So I think the fact that we put that in, we framed that as part of the process from the beginning, helps people. It helps to motivate people to keep going, along with the no choice path. They all work together. It makes sense to have no choice if you're being led and trained and kind of, help to develop skills that will take you to something or set of things that are thoroughly worthwhile beyond what you're able to access right now.
How do you navigate the desire for that experience? Because and maybe I can speak for myself too. It's like, okay, I'm going to follow this, Zen master has laid out this trail, and I'm just like waiting for that, that Kensho moment, or that, waiting for some like awakening moment to happen, and it's not coming. And it's like, okay, is this really working? Like, and so it's that, there's an attachment, and I know it's all about being with what is, but how do you navigate not selling people on it, but inviting people into those deeper possibilities, while at the same time, they might not be experiencing those possibilities, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I'll just say a quick word and then turn it over to Jack. But from my point of view, it's like really helping people be aware not just of that, but of other aspects of meditation practice that are intrinsically helpful anyway. So there's a risk in meditation for the vast majority of people that they have too small a view of its possibilities, that it's just about nervous system regulation, which obviously is a great thing. I don't want to do that down. Or they're too focused on, I got to get this non-dual thing. I got to have this experience that I don't exist the way I thought I did, that I'm part of the whole cosmos or whatever. And actually, it's not just one or the other of those. It's very much both and more. It's, there's a lot of development that can happen within the world of mindfulness beyond just stress reduction. We can really start to parse out our experience in very helpful ways that are deeply enriching when we understand the sense experiences more clearly. We understand thinking, we understand feelings, and we get much more adept at hosting them rather than being taken out by them, and so on. And we can discover our connectivity in a deeper level, that we're always in a kind of dialogue with the world around us. And if we get too tightly focused on just me and my view and my life, it's going to be, there's going to be suffering there. Whereas if we open up more and live in a kind of open conversation with the world around us, that's intrinsically more fulfilling and more enriching, and so on. And then there's flow states as well, which are profoundly helpful. And so there's a lot of intermediate material that's really good. There's not yet a blinding awakening experience. And so we really emphasize that as well. But yeah, Jack, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well,
Not being
just
too goal focused, whatever. Yeah.
yeah, but Lou, I definitely deeply empathize with that point because it's something that's come up in my own practice. I hear about Henry talking about these incredible kind of Kensho experiences, and you can't help feeling, well, man, I want that, right? That's just such a natural kind of human reaction to it. And then there's the sort of there's the next layer, which is, well, I know that the more I want it, the more I strive, the more it's probably going to be out of reach, and so there's this kind of vicious cycle. And of course, you have to stop striving. But so the way we do that in the app from a kind of design perspective is we actually we return to topics again and again. So as a user, when you're going through, you always, this is never the last chance you have to get this. This is in the spirit of exploration. Something may happen, something may not. More likely than often, it will not. But that's totally okay, and we're gonna return to it, and we're gonna have more and more chances to kind of let it unfold naturally.
Jack, I'm curious what it was like for you growing up with Henry as your uncle and maybe him being on his path and like not every uncle is a Zen master. I think a lot of people's uncles are a lot different than that. And so, in growing up, how does that impact you, or is Henry like the weird uncle that's on his like, spiritual quest or something?
Yeah, man, I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit it now, but the fact is that for most of my kind of teenage years and 20s, Henry was kind of, boring old Uncle Henry, kind of going on about this thing called mindfulness that I just didn't see any relevance to my own life. And yeah, back then I was, I worked in, kind of, high pressure jobs, and I had worked in a kind of a work culture that, it was kind of taboo to talk about mental health. And if you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen. And meditation was for wimps. And I'm very honestly very embarrassed to say this now, but that was how I felt. And then, yeah, about 3 years ago, that all changed, luckily for me. And I went from realizing, like, oh my God, like, OMG, I have an uncle who's a Zen master and a meditation teacher. This is a wild privilege. And then when I started getting into meditation, I was able to, like, just have a speed dial number to a Zen master. It was really quite amazing for getting my practice going. And actually, that was one of the first motivations for the app was, man, that amazing experience of being able to like have that guidance and clarity and reassurance that I got from Henry. How can we kind of package that into an app so that many people could share what that was like?
What was the experience in the Pyrenees. I had an experience 10 years ago after just getting into meditation for like a few months that really opened me up and really started me on this journey that I've been on for the last 10 years. And so be curious, like what was the experience in the Pyrenees?
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear more about what you experienced 10 years ago as well, Lou. But yeah, for me, I actually at that point I had I'd never really meditated. I had like maybe tried it like 3 or 4 times. You know, I kind of knew it was kind of good for me somewhere along the lines. But I had recently quit my job to take some time out to go traveling. I was walking with a friend, and we had downloaded a bunch of podcasts, and you know they were like we had a little speaker with us as we were hiking up these hot kind of dusty mountain trails, and we had podcasts on like politics and sport, and there was this one called on free will, and I was like, yeah, that seems interesting. I have no idea what that's about, but cool, we'll listen to it. And we played it, and there was a line in that podcast that went, "You are not standing on the bank of the river of consciousness. You are the river of consciousness." And as I heard those words, something clicked or fell apart maybe in kind of my perception of the world, and I suddenly realized that things that I had taken to be true were maybe questionable, or like I wasn't quite sure what was true anymore, like, and it was very confusing. And a few days later, when I got back from the hike, I called Henry, and I was like, hey, this kind of thing has happened, and I don't really know what I should do about it. And I was hoping he would say, hey, here's a book or here's another podcast. It's going to clear it right up and you can just kind of move on with your life. But basically what he said was, well, man, you've got to meditate. And so that was for me the start of the path of practice.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I had just to respond to that experience because it kind of leads into a question I think I had for Henry around awakening because I had an experience. I thought there was probably three meditation teachers in the world. I had just found this thing. I was doing it because I was in a group where successful people, quote unquote, meditated to, to reduce stress or to get an edge, so to, quote unquote. And through meditation, I wasn't spiritual. I wasn't looking for anything spiritual, but it kind of found me on this hike that I was on by myself. And I had this whole experience where I decided to quit drinking and go sober. And just this whole world opened up and this cathartic, like really beautiful, ecstatic moment. And some of that opening led to a few more of these experiences happening in the days that followed, which culminated in me quitting my job with no plans, no money saved. It was just a 180-degree like flip of my life that just threw me into this other world. It was like a clear, the experience that I had the day that I quit my job was so intense that it was such a clear like who I was before that day, who I was after that day. And I had no support. Like I didn't know what was happening to me. I thought I was, and Henry maybe you've had experience or seen students like this. I thought I was special. Like I had this special spiritual experience happening to me. And yeah, for good or bad, I think things could have ended up a lot worse than they did. I somehow was supported by the universe. It was the highest of highs, the lowest of lows. The only thing when I would do research around it was like a Kundalini awakening. Every time I would look at that experience, I was like, it's something like this, how abrupt it was. And so that word awakening, I used to tell people like, Lou, what happened to you? And I was like, well, I had a spiritual awakening. And I've actually been less using that word because after doing more study and just being around more people with, humbling myself as much as I can, I tend to I need humblings a lot. But as I humble myself and listen to people like, you, Henry, and other people talk, people that are really steeped in a lineage, I'm like, was that awakening? Like, or is that an opening? So I tend to use like an opening. It was an awakening in some sort. So to move that into a question, Henry, how do you describe, you talk about awakening, like if you hearing my experience, like does that feel just like a spiritual experience on the path, or how do you define awakening? I know it wasn't like a no self awakening moment like that. It was definitely different than that. But yeah, just would love to hear like how you define or think of the states and stages. I don't know if you know like Ken Wilber's work that talks about the having a state versus being in like a stage. And so yeah, anything that you could, I'm sure you could share, you know, hours on that, but anything on that that feels relevant.
Yeah, I mean, it's, first of all, there's great. It sounds fantastic that you had that kind of shift in the way you understood yourself and your life. That's a critical thing. And likewise with Jack, suddenly seeing, and often it is sudden actually. There's one man, it's a huge topic, but I could say this like different traditions have different ways of understanding awakening, actually. Um, but I think in Buddhism, it usually coalesces around some glimpse that what I've taken myself to be hasn't been what I thought it was. Like I thought it was a fixed thing called me, a sort of entity of some kind that's somehow here in me, and that I have been this as long as I can remember, and this is me, this is what I am, and the world is all around me, happening outside of me, and I'm navigating through it. And in some sense, this me that I am is sort of separable from everything else. And um, in an awakening experience, I think broadly as it's understood in Buddhism, because there's many different streams of Buddhism, it would be to see that that has actually been no more than an idea. It's been really no more than a thought. And, thoughts come and go. And it seems like it's not, it's permanent, it's solid, it's fixed, it's been here all along. But actually, no, it's just been an oft repeated thought. And to see that is quite dramatic. It may not sound like much, it's just recognizing a thought. It is, but actually it's huge because it's a thought that has become a sort of solid preconception and assumption about life that I've almost been walking on like on a concrete floor. And suddenly that floor's gone. And it's very, very liberating in the right context. It can also be very destabilizing. And this brings me to the point you mentioned about support. I think it can make a vast difference what context we're in when a shift like that happens, and what kind of support we can reach out for. I mean, really, that's one of the things that I'm very motivated by. I had an awakening experience. It was sort of like that. It had other dimensions to it when I was 19, without any interest at all in spiritual matters, nothing at all like that. It was a thoroughly logical, rational, or seeking to be thoroughly logical, rational empiricist, and it just, but I couldn't deny the reality of what I'd just seen about my very own consciousness when that happened to me. I've written about it in my book, One Blade of Grass, actually. Um, and I had no support. I had nowhere to turn. I was initially euphoric for some weeks afterwards, and felt like I'd suddenly understood the nature of all things, and and in some sense, I don't, I don't repudiate that now. I think I sort of had understood something very important, um, but I just had nowhere to go with it, and it was only when I got into meditation that I started to get this essential other piece of the equation, which is having some way to integrate whatever we've realized. And I do think that I don't know whether meditation is the best way to have these kinds of experiences. It certainly is a tried and tested way to make us more liable to having these kinds of insight. But I'm pretty sure that it's the best way of integrating them. And so, because I occasionally see people who've had psychedelic experiences that did open something up. I think there's a lot of noise in psychedelic experience as well, but you can get a good signal. Sometimes it seems to happen. But what are you going to do about it? I think you've got to have some kind of long-term practice that can help you integrate it. So, and along with that, yeah, support. And, so usually if you get into meditation, you're going to some degree, have some kind of support system around it. And so, I'm really very dedicated. I mean, I've dedicated my life in latter years to trying to help, help people come to know themselves in new ways and have a way of integrating it so it becomes a meaningful change in their life that actually changes how they live day to day.
Yeah. Speaking of like you mentioned the different strands of Buddhism and the lineage that you come from and having like that lineage of support, that transmission. I think that's something that I've come to appreciate more and more and come to yearn for more and more, like something that goes back a long time. I tend to be spiritually polyamorous, I guess you could say, where it's like I take this thing and this thing and this thing, and there is always a longing for like my teacher or my path. And if I feel called to anyone currently, it tends to be, I really loved Richard Rohr giving a plug for your book because I've done a lot of work with his center and just really appreciative of like his, growing up Catholic and having just that kind of connection. I've been reading a lot of Thomas Merton recently, so really feeling connected to that kind of Christian mysticism lineage. But still, it's like, what do I, when I had that experience, Henry, I actually thought about is like, well, what do I do now? Do I either join the Peace Corps or do I join a monastery? Like those were like the questions that I was thinking about. And then I, did what probably you would say shouldn't do. And let me just start sharing meditation with people without any real like actual training. Let me just start sharing with my friends because they're like, well, Lou, what happened to you? I was like, you got to try this thing. I did this thing on a mountain and this happened. And so like, that's kind of how I got started in sharing meditation. But all that to say, like Sanbo, I was actually less familiar with Sanbo. I had my first Rinzai experience just in the fall. I did an intro to Zen weekend at Daibosatsu Zen Monastery in New York. And I had done some Theravada retreats and it was very different, and I've heard Rinzai to be like the samurai, so very strict, very methodical. Everyone's doing everything together. And it was actually like, in some ways, maybe what I needed, but I also was very averse to it. Was like, I don't like this Theravada, at least, at Insight Meditation Society, those feel like a vacation. Like I can do my own thing, I can sit down and meditate, but the Zen practice felt like I'm in a, train. It was just an intro weekend. So can you speak more to Sanbo Zen and like also maybe bringing this back to the app? Like, is that what you're teaching in the app or is it a coagulation of many different things?
Yeah, I'll just quickly speak to that. So Sambo Zen is not monastic, and it really stripped out a lot of the ceremonial and more traditional cultural sides of Zen. It made that decision in the 1940s to be more open to to anybody. You didn't have to be a monk or a nun, and to be more open to foreigners as well, non-Japanese. And it became quite influential in the West in the 60s. There was a book called The Three Pillars of Zen that came out. And alongside sort of stripping out more of the cultural trappings, it also put an emphasis on this is a practice to help you understand your own mind, your own nature, and your own relationship with the world. It's not about liturgy and doctrine, and it's not, in a sense, basically they'd say it's not religious. It's actually a way of coming to know yourself deeply by understanding what you are and what you aren't, and therefore your relationship with the world more clearly. So people don't wear robes. I happen to have a very short hair because I'm bald, but you don't have to have a shaved head. And so that to me was much more congenial. I wasn't really interested in adopting foreign cultural trappings. That wasn't of interest to me. And of course, there's a lot of people like that. But the app is much more than just Sambo Zen. 'Cause what's good about Sambo Zen is it's very single-minded. It's all about Kensho. And Kensho is an experience, by the way, it means seeing your own original nature. So it is a moment of a kind of revelatory awakening experience, or a deep, deep insight into the nature of who you've been all along. And that kind of experience doesn't happen often in a person's lifetime. It may be that intensity of experience. It may be, a handful of times at most for most people. And for Sambo Zen, there's actually further insights you can have beyond that. but it's always about integrating them. So I thought that was quite a good approach, a sort of practical approach, really. Um, but the app is much more than that. It's really trying to say, hey, there's broad categories of benefit you get from meditation, not just that. That is probably kind of the deepest the way it can help you. But there's a whole lot along the way that you want to learn regardless, and you also need these other sides to it if you're going to integrate that kind of awakening anyway. Yeah, Jack, do you want to say anything about the app sort of overview of all that? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the big parts to consider with this question is Zen Koans, right? Because that's a method of training that is very is a big part of Sambo Zen. Um, and but Zen Koans, and obviously, yeah, Lou, please please feel free to, we can kind of explore more on Zen Koans if you like to, but that's these are potential kind of little portals to awakening moments that handed down through centuries, if not millennia. And so that's so we do have Zen koans in the app, but they are quite far down the single path. So we have someone go through quite a lot of training in mindfulness, in support, in flow, to get them to a point where to our best guess, they're kind of ready to kind of explore these kind of riddles for the mind to stop your mind working. And so that's kind of one way where we're drawing on elements of traditional Zen, but doing it in a way that we hope is kind of going to be more accessible and applicable for someone who's kind of starting a journey with us.
Jack, do you feel specifically like called towards more like Zen or like Buddhism? Like, does that kind of speak to you more than, let's say, other sort of religions or spiritual paths, or do you find yourself like curious about other things too?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I definitely, I also like Henry kind of, grew up in a, kind of like with a rationalist, a kind of empiricist, sort of scientific kind of background and mindset. I read, Richard Dawkins and those kind of books when I was a teenager. And so it's been a bit of a transformation for me actually to, start to, I wouldn't say I study in any formal way, but, as part of just the job and the work of the app, like to kind of get to know parts of Buddhism. But I do, yeah, I do think that there is, of course, there are still, of course, based on the kind of tradition we're talking about, there are lots of religious trappings that I would kind of be a bit hesitant about, like reincarnation or something like that. But it does seem to me like there is a really deep and meaningful core in that teaching about the nature of who you really are that doesn't, at least to my knowledge, exist in other major world religions. And of course, other major world religions have many good things to say. But that kind of core, I think, is really what is unique and powerful about Buddhist teaching.
So Henry, I listened to your, and I don't know if you want to respond to that, Henry, but if I listened to your podcast with Sean Fargo, and he you mentioned something about like having that deep training, like being steeped in some sort of training where um, it's hard to it's hard to become really embodied, I guess, in your teaching or your practice without that. At least I totally like believe that. But I'm coming back to that question of like whether it's one path or multiple paths. Like, what would you say to me or to anyone listening that might be like more, taking from this and this and this? Like, what are we losing out without having one tradition or one lineage?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we can all do what we want to do. That's okay. I mean, it's more like recognizing what the pros and cons are of different approaches. I think to be quite eclectic can be very helpful in, you'll have a broader toolkit. You'll expose yourself to different ways of doing this, and that's an important part of a learning, I think. On the other hand, if you're at some point called to follow one particular path for a while, you get the benefit of going deeper. And to me, what that really means is you get to bump up against things in yourself that uh, are difficult, and you don't get to shy away from them by going to something else that's more comfortable. You get to work through them because you're sticking with one pathway. I think that's probably, in my own case, I mean, I was pretty eclectic to start with. Then I had a long phase of being pretty single minded about my path of practice. And now I'm more eclectic again. But if I hadn't done that drilling down deep, and, I wouldn't have worked through things that were uncomfortable. I'd have shied away from them and veered towards what made me feel better short term. And actually, I mean, for me anyway, it's been really important to go through difficult stuff, and to see that a single path of training can do that has meant that I feel my training has gone deeper in my being. It's been more thorough. I'm sure it's not perfectly thorough. There's more to work on, but it's certainly went deeper than I ever could have imagined. That was for sure. There were course times when it was very hard, and I'd rather been doing something else, but I sort of stuck with it, and I'm glad I did. So that's just a couple of thoughts on that. But I
Yeah.
do want to say actually something about the religious thing. I mean, I feel that our app is not religious at all. It's really an approach to understanding human life and human experience and human consciousness that does draw from these old traditions, but it also has some scientific inflection as well, science-based inflection. And I think we're in a great time right now where uh, you know, uh, science is being brought to bear on the very things that these ancient traditions have explored, the ones that are focused mainly on the nature of consciousness. And Buddhism is preeminent among them just because at least some branches of it have had much less religiosity. I mean, Zen, for example, doesn't say anything about reincarnation, it just doesn't go there. Um, and although some strands of Zen do have more religiosity in their ritual and stuff, some don't, and that's true of modern Vipassana largely as well. Although some of them seem to believe in reincarnation, but generally, I think we're in an incredible time when the insights of those deep meditation traditions are available without having to go deeply into their particular religious doctrine and practices. And I think that's a great thing because we're sort of getting what we really want, which is what can help us with our human life and our human existence.
Yeah, I'm glad you spoke to that because I know or I've seen some teachers kind of rail against what they would call the McMindfulness of like, let's strip down everything from these traditions and let's kind of make it palatable. And my own perspective on that was always, well, this is an introduction. This is someone's in. Like, yeah, yes, it might be maybe there's some culture, something that has a more robust background to this, but as someone I actually for 4 years I was teaching mindfulness in schools and teaching teachers and students and doing a lot of work in mindfulness in schools. That was like a big focus of my work for a while. And obviously you had you weren't I have my spiritual interest and I would talk differently to outside of schools, and you have to have a secular space. And for me it's like, well, they're introductions, and I always felt like if just one person was like, "Oh, we did this thing in school, like let me go deeper." It's like they can then go deeper, and if they want to go and wear the robes and do the things, like it gives them an introduction. So it seems like this app for many people, can be that introduction if they were to even go. I mean, I think it sounds like it's going to take them can take them all the way if they want to go through it. But so yeah, I just appreciate you sharing about that. Jack, do you have any interest in teaching? Like, is it too soon to like go on that path, or you're just on the business end?
Oh man, that's yeah, that's too soon. I mean, I've loved learning and feel really, really grateful to get the chance to work with Henry and kind of and learn from him. And you know what? I've done one or two mini guided meditations with a couple of friends, but that's the limit. That's the limit of my teaching. And but yeah, I think for the moment it's just yeah, I can yeah, I see a long kind of path of learning ahead before any kind of decision on that side.
So I'll admit I'm kind of like a rogue meditation teacher. I actually don't use that teacher label as much. I'd use it sometimes, but when I'm around someone like you, Henry, like it doesn't feel right to actually use teacher because I, I see the way that meditation has lived in my life has been a form of how a singer sees a song. Like I have some emotional thing that I'm going through, and so I will do a little talk with about it in like a recording, and I just will go through what I feel like is supportive for me through this thing, and so I feel like I have an endless amount of trove for like creating unique meditations. And I know that that's yeah, this is how I've seen it as an art, and I've let myself just be like an artist in it and just create without yeah, but I also understand there might be some boundaries of like yeah, there might be some boundaries to that. And regardless of that, with the ability to get a mindfulness certification, over the weekend or, online, what are your thoughts around like getting trainings like that versus maybe you've already spoken to it versus like the training that you went through. Like I love that it's you can't get anywhere. You can't just go and sign up to be an authorized anything or an authenticated anything. That takes like a certain level of like real deal commitment in a way that a certification, which you can go and get, you don't have to necessarily have the practice experience. So are you supportive of the general like mindfulness movement to get more teachers out there, or do you feel like there should be more guardrails as far as like a deeper training for it?
Yeah, I honestly I have sort of mixed views on it. I think on the one hand, of course, it's great that the more that there is of this out in the world, the better. The more that we're aware that we have something called a nervous system, and that it can be more dysregulated and it can be more regulated. The more we're aware of that, the better. The more well-regulated nervous systems there are in the world, the better. The more we understand reactivity and how to not be led by it into destructive behavior, the more we understand the mechanisms that create suffering versus the mechanisms that create well-being, the better. At the same time, I know from personal experience that it's really hard to know how much I don't know. It's really hard to get some sense of the limits of my own understanding. And that's one of the great things that a deep teacher can help with. They can actually see, oh, yeah, you've got that. And it feels like the whole universe, but actually it's one little quadrant. It's a little quadrant within a quadrant. There's much, much more. And I can't really tell you what that more is because your frame of reference isn't yet open to it. So I mean, I assume that I'm still there right now, that some greater teacher would see where I'm still stuck in a box that feels like the whole universe, but it's not. And so I think that's one of the great things, that a long relationship with a teacher or teaching, or the willingness to constantly be humble, I guess, about it, which I mean, I mean, to the best of my ability. I don't know really where I'm not as humble as I should be. But I do still have a teacher. So I have various mentors and one teacher that I'm really glad I still have him, because it's a constant reminder. There's more. There's always more. There's always more. They say actually, Buddha is still only halfway there. They say that in Zen.
Yeah, it's a beautiful just reminder, I think, for anyone wherever on their path is, like to yeah, to continue asking or continue knowing that we don't know, and opening to find that out. And I know in my path, when I have felt like I've gotten some sense of, let's say, kind of third chakra energy, like some power or some feeling like, okay, I got some things figured out. Those are the times where, yeah, I get leveled. And tend, if we don't try to be humble, I found that we're continually humbled. So, the checks and balances sometimes work out in that way, but at the same time, there's a lot out in the world, and yeah, trying to, part of this podcast is a conversation of doing this work with integrity. And I had a teacher on here who's a Theravadan teacher, Jessica Mori, and she almost didn't want to do the podcast. Actually, we were about to like abort, which was going to be an interesting one to sit with afterwards. But she had, her, and the reason is because the business of meditation, and I'm well aware, in having this title of this podcast, that I'm sure there's going to be some judgments. Some people would see it and have some views upon it, for sure. I totally understand that, and I welcome that, and that's part of why I want to have these conversations. For me, when I quit my job, like, I quit my job, I didn't have money saved, like, so making a living and something I loved, like meditation, like they were both happening at the same time. And so it's like, well, yeah, like, well, how do I bring this into the world and support myself in this life, and how, and I do something good. And I know in Buddhist lineage, the teachings are for free. Like, meditation is free. Like, you don't pay for it. And so, as two people who run a meditation app that does have a fee to it, like, how do you think of the balance, like the business of meditation, and just both in like a moral or an integrity sense, and just coming to market in a crowded business meditation app world. So there's a lot. So I'll let you take wherever you want to take that.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe I can start, then and then you can kind of chime in. But it's something I really appreciate the question, because it's something that we think about a lot, and I don't know if we have it right. And so, kind of, yeah, it's something that we want to keep thinking about and keep working on. But um, yeah, like, there are some kind of insurmountable facts. Like, we have a team. It's a small team, but we have a team of engineers and designers, and so we need to pay for them to have a salary and keep a job. And we also have really big, ambitious plans for how to expand the app, include more teaching, expand the pathway, add more features that will help people with their practice. And so, that's gonna, like, we need to have some income to help realize that. At the same time, we completely agree that financial reasons should never preclude someone from getting access to this teaching, that can be so helpful in their lives. So how do we reconcile those two things? Well, the approach that we've taken to date is that we offer 100% scholarships. So if anyone can't afford it, all they need to do is email us, and we won't ask any questions. We guarantee 100% of those will get given out. And so, but of course, if someone can afford it, then that's wonderful, because then that helps to keep our kind of our little company alive. So that's like one way in which we try to kind of thread that needle. But yeah, it's not easy. Like, to be, we're operating in a market system, and there are certain constraints around that. But yet we're trying to really, like, our mission is to offer this teaching to the world. And so in the end, we have to, keep, what, as a CEO, I have to keep one eye on the numbers, right? Are we going to have enough coming in to meet the outgoings? But at the same time, we kind of try and answer every question with first thinking about our mission, and like, what's good for the mission, what's going to help support the mission. And we sort of hope that if we get that bit right, the financial picture will by and large take care of itself.
Yeah, that's great, Jack. Another point I would make is, like, in terms of the accessibility that we've created versus what it was like before, when everything was in an in-person center, and then when everything was on Zoom calls, we've expanded that accessibility hugely. And at the same time, we've reduced the cost, even for those who can afford to pay, very, very dramatically. You can get, for $90, could you even get a 1 hour coaching session on mindfulness? I don't know whether you could get that. I'm not sure. It would probably cost more than that. And our entire year's pathway costs $90 if you're paying full whack. And as Jack said, anybody can have it for nothing if they need to. So, I mean, just from my point of view, from looking at the teaching I've done over the last 15 years that I've been a teacher, I mean, it's by far the most accessible thing I've ever offered, and been in a position to offer. If you wanted to be in training at the Zen Center, you had to be a member. Well, that already costs 3 times as much then for a year. And then you had to pay for retreats and, and so on. So I think yes, it is a business model, but we use that in order to just greatly increase accessibility to the teachings that we wanted to make as widely available as possible, for those who will benefit from it. We're not trying to force it on anybody, but we want those who would find this helpful to be able to get it more easily in all ways.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful to to use the funds, and people have the funds. Great. If they don't have the funds, that's welcome too. Yeah, and supporting. Like I think there's, you know, I think money can be a steward of really great things, right? And it obviously can also be people attached to it as the means to an end. And so in the spiritual world and the meditation world, it's always a fascinating exploration and topic to explore. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit of the background of how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I think the it's like, what's the end goal here? Like, is it money for its own sake? Like that to me feels like a red flag. But if it's money as a temporary means to then further a project or further a mission or make it more accessible, like that's like, the money is the means to an end. And I think that feels like a very different kind of objective and kind of energy with what the money is for.
You remind me of my favorite analogy around money is that it's in with business and the work, I guess even the work that you're doing, it's like road trips. It's like you don't go on road trips to tour gas stations. You go on road trips for the journey, right? So you're not sharing this meditation app just to make money. You're sharing it because it's fueling it getting out there to more people, seeing more people, having more experiences. And I always find that just a good frame to come back to.
Yeah. Hey, Luke, can I just add to that also that's true of meditation. Meditation isn't for its own sake. It's for the
Mm,
sake of living in this world in a more harmonious and helpful way. It's for the sake of understanding the so-called three poisons of greed and hate and ignorance or misunderstanding, delusion, and so that we live differently, so that we can both individually and collectively make a more compassionate and wise society and global society.
that's beautiful. Um, We have a couple minutes left. I want to be respectful of both of your times. Is there anything around the app that you want to share that we didn't get to? Honestly, I was curious, like how long, Henry, did it take, as someone who records meditations, how long did it take you to record all the content? This is like a more, technical question that I was curious about. So you're welcome to answer that or not. But yeah, even your day-to-day roles. I know, Jack, you're the CEO. Henry, I'm curious, now that you've recorded everything, like, are you having roles in the app? Like, or are you in the back end side of it? So wherever you want to take our last few minutes, I'll welcome it.
Well, I'll just say that I'm far from recording everything. I'm still, but this is going to be,
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
more
Okay. Wow.
pathway. Yeah, more pathway.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. No one's gotten like caught up to you yet. Like they're like, hey,
Yes,
there's
yes, yes. A
that,
few have,
no
and
way.
we're laying down new track all the time. Yeah.
That's wild. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we've got a kind of vision of making it like a roughly a 3-year program. So kind of like, like an undergraduate degree. At least in the UK, undergraduate degrees tend to be 3 years. I think in the States they're often 4, but like that kind of length of time. um, which would be kind of like the full expression of, yeah, like the teaching that Henry would want to do in that format. And then there's other areas that we're like exploring. We've started doing some in-person events where we bring app users together in some of our bigger cities, and those are just really beautiful, kind of amazing energy in the room, and some, yeah, sitting and chance for people to connect. And so that's kind of like another area, another piece that we want to try and figure out how we bring the online and offline worlds together, um, with like a kind of global Sangha.
Beautiful. Where so everyone go check out the Way app, and you're probably like wondering, Lou, aren't you always on Insight Timer? And this is just maybe you guys appreciate knowing this. But what I do, because I use Insight Timer a lot for the timer, because I have like a bunch of meditation already recorded on it. So I'll go in the morning, I'll go on Insight Timer, I'll start my 30 minutes, and then I'll jump over to the Way app, and then I'll listen to the Way. So I have two meditations apps happening at the same time just to track my meditation. So go check out the Way if you're like, wow, overwhelmed by Insight Timer or other apps to really follow one teacher that has walked the path. I highly encourage, if you're looking for a different support, to check out the Way app. Is there anywhere else you guys want to point people to, Henry? I know, I think you have a event or a teaching coming up soon, I think online too. So yeah, welcome to share where people can find you.
Well, I've got a couple of books relevant to practice: One Blade of Grass and Original Love. And yeah, if you check out thewayapp.com or henryshukman.com, you'll find upcoming events both in person and online.
Awesome. Well,
Jack,
thank you
did I leave
both.
anything out, Jack?
No, that's all good. That's all good. Lou, I just wanted to say congrats on reaching. You said retreat 23, right? Retreat
23. Yeah.
24.
Yep.
Yeah, nice progress. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Lovely to
Yeah.
hear that.
Thanks. Yeah. Appreciate you guys. All right. Take care, friends.